Have you ever wondered why some men still whisper her name decades after she's gone? Not the one who made the most noise, not the most beautiful, but the one who made him feel something he couldn't explain. The truth is, when a man reaches 60, his regrets are rarely about careers or cars. It's the women he couldn't hold, the moments he failed to understand, the soul he once stood before, but wasn't yet man enough to recognize. He doesn't remember the perfume or the curve of her waist. He remembers how she looked at him when he wasn't speaking. He remembers the peace in her silence, the mirror she became, revealing what he was and what he wasn't ready to face. At that age, when the noise of ambition fades and the applause dims, a man begins to see clearly, and what he often sees is her. The one he let slip through his fingers because he was chasing things that never fed his soul. She wasn't loud. She wasn't needy. She didn't burn herself proving her worth. She simply was. And in being, she unsettled him. Because she saw straight through his armor and loved him anyway. Most men are taught how to handle a woman who sees them. They're taught to conquer, to fix, to pursue, to protect. But what do you do when the woman standing before you doesn't need saving, only presence? When her strength is not in how she loves you, but how she stays rooted in herself. That kind of woman terrifies the unprepared, not because she is demanding, but because she demands depth, not with words, but with silence. She doesn't beg, she chooses, and if you're not ready, she lets you go. Carl Jung said that everything we do not face in ourselves, we meet later as fate. And for many men, she was that fate. The quiet test, the soul-level invitation to grow up emotionally, before it's too late. But instead, many walked away, not because she failed them, but because she revealed too much of what they hadn't yet healed. And now, at 60, 70, in the silence of a house that used to be filled with movement, they remember, she was not the most beautiful woman he ever knew. She was the most present, the one who didn't try to dazzle, but dared to sit with his shadow, the one who could feel his sadness before he spoke it. And instead of filling the silence with shallow affection, she waited. She knew something most women never learn, that real connection cannot be rushed, and a man cannot be loved into healing unless he's ready to walk through the fire himself. But he wasn't ready. He thought her standards were judgment, her boundaries, resistance. He mistook her peace for detachment. And because she didn't perform her worth, he failed to see it. And now he sits with the quiet echo of her absence, not just in the room, but in himself. You may know a man like this, or perhaps you are one. You've spent years building, proving, earning, but somewhere in the journey, you silenced your soul. You traded depth for duty, and now the weight of unspoken memory is heavier than any title you ever carried. This is not about shame, it's about awakening. Because that woman, the one you regret, she was a mirror. And if you still remember her, it's not just nostalgia. It's your soul, calling you back to the part of you that once knew how to feel deeply, before the world told you to harden. He remembers now, not the days she stayed, but the moment she walked away without anger, without needing to explain. She just left, with her dignity intact and her silence louder than any goodbye. That moment didn't hit immediately. It unfolded slowly, like fog creeping in after dusk. A quiet emptiness in places he didn't even know she touched. Her presence, it turns out, had been woven into the smallest parts of his life. Her voice in the kitchen, her breath beside him in the morning, her gaze when he spoke too quickly, the way she waited for what he wasn't saying. He thought she'd always be there. Until one day, she wasn't. She wasn't angry. She was finished. This is the woman older men remember with trembling honesty. Not because she screamed, but because she didn't. She didn't fight to stay where she wasn't met. And in that, she taught him the difference between love and survival. She didn't demand his attention. She revealed what it cost to be inattentive. You see, the feminine soul, when awake, doesn't need to dominate or submit. She simply shines. And that kind of radiance doesn't beg to be chosen. It reveals who is ready to receive it. But many men, especially in their younger years, don't know what to do with radiance. They chase spark. They pursue beauty. They perform power. But what she offered wasn't performance. It was presence. And that presence held a mirror to his chaos. And he looked away. Now he wonders if he was too proud, too distracted, too caught in the noise of a world that taught him to win, but not how to hold. Carl Jung said that what you resist not only persists, it grows in size, and her absence grew. It became a shadow in his memory, larger than life. She stopped calling, but she never truly left, not from his mind, not from the quiet, not from the ache that settles at night, when there's nothing left to distract him from himself. And here's the truth few men say aloud. Sometimes you don't realize a woman was sacred until the chaos is gone and the silence is yours alone. Not all regrets are loud. Some live in the pauses between conversations you can't have anymore. In the familiar tune that still makes your throat tighten. In the birthday you still remember, even if you no longer reach out. She didn't leave because he was unlovable. She left because she knew he hadn't yet learned how to love himself or her. And real love, the kind that honors both people's wholeness, can't survive where self-abandonment lives. So he sits with it now, with age, with wisdom, with pain, with a quiet understanding that she wasn't just someone he lost. She was a doorway he wasn't ready to walk through. And the older he gets, the more he realizes, not all doors open twice. There's a kind of clarity that only comes after 50. A sharpening of memory that doesn't romanticize, but reveals. And for many men, the woman they let go is no longer a memory. She is a haunting. Not for what she said, but for what she didn't. Not for the way she left, but for how long she stayed when he gave her so little to hold on to. This is the paradox older men quietly carry. They loved her most when they understood her least. When her softness felt like weakness. When her stillness felt like disinterest. But now, through the lens of time and emotional maturity, they see what they missed. Her stillness was strength. Her softness, resilience. She wasn't waiting for him to change. She was waiting to be met. And when he couldn't, she chose herself. The masculine ego is slow to accept what it can't control. He thought he had time. He thought she'd wait. But a woman who knows her worth doesn't wait for someone to realize it. She walks away. Not because she doesn't love, but because she finally does herself. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine within the man, as the soul's compass. And often, the woman he loses is a reflection of that inner feminine he never learned to honor. She mirrored everything he was too afraid to face. His fear of intimacy, his unresolved wounds, his hidden insecurities dressed up as confidence. And instead of embracing the healing she offered, he turned away. Because healing asks for vulnerability, and vulnerability asks a man to stand naked before someone who could leave. And that is terrifying. But now he knows. The ache he feels isn't just regret. It's the sound of his soul knocking on a door he once ignored. It's the whisper of the anima, reminding him that woman wasn't too much. She was exactly what his wounded self couldn't yet hold. You may believe this doesn't apply to you. You may think your life is fine, structured, stable, full. But pay attention to the silence. Pay attention to the names that make your breath catch. Pay attention to the way certain memories rise uninvited when you're shaving, driving, folding laundry. Because if there is a woman who still lives in your bones, not out of lust or loss, but out of unfinished becoming, she is the one you must reckon with. Not to bring her back, but to bring yourself forward, to become the kind of man who, if he met her today, would know how to stay. And if you're already married to someone else, this is not about betrayal. This is about integration, about understanding that the feminine doesn't only live in others, it lives in you. And your relationship to her, the one who walked away, is your relationship to the deepest parts of yourself. So ask yourself, why did she leave? Not what she said, but what your silence meant, what your absence created, what your unreadiness cost. Because sometimes, the man you are at 60 can see clearly what the man at 40 couldn't even look at. There is a night every man faces eventually. Not the kind filled with noise or distraction, but the kind where silence isn't just around him, it's inside him. A stillness so heavy, even the ticking of the clock seems to echo like thunder. And it's been that silence he walks to the mirror. Not the mirror in his hallway, but the mirror of truth, the one that doesn't flatter, doesn't lie, doesn't soften what's there. He sees the creases by his eyes, the ones she once kissed when he laughed. He sees the slope of his shoulders, proud but tired now. And he notices the way his eyes don't search anymore. They wait. For what, he isn't sure. It's there, in that mirror, that something breaks, not violently, but softly. A quiet collapsing of old defenses. Because when he looks long enough, he doesn't just see the man who lost her. He sees the boy who never knew how to keep her. And for the first time in decades, he stops blaming her. And he stops blaming himself. Because Carl Jung once said, the terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that's the war most men never win. Not with the world, but with their own reflection. You see, this is where most men falter. Not because they lack strength, they fought battles, built empires, carried families. But because no one taught them how to sit in stillness and face their own shadow. No one told them that power without presence is just performance, that conquering the world means nothing if you lose the woman who saw your soul. So he remembers the day she left, not with screaming or ultimatums, but with silence. The kind of silence that speaks in sacred finality. And now, in this quiet mirror of regret, he doesn't rehearse what he should have said. He doesn't craft speeches or rewrite history. He simply whispers the one sentence that cracks the armor. I wasn't ready for her. Not in ego, not in patience, not in spirit. And it's there, in that humble confession, that healing begins. Because when a man over 50 admits this, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's shadow work. It's the return to the soul. It's no longer about chasing youth or rewriting the past. It's about integrating the lessons and honoring the woman who reflected back everything he couldn't yet become. And maybe you, watching this now, know exactly what that feels like. Maybe you still dream of her laughter. Maybe you can't remember her voice, but remember how you felt in her presence, like you were seen, like you were home, like the world stopped performing. Or maybe you pushed her away with silence, pride, distraction, because you didn't know how to stay open when love got too close. That doesn't make you broken. That makes you human. But what you do now, in this new season of life, that's what defines you. Do you keep pretending? Or do you finally turn toward the part of you still waiting to be seen by you? This channel isn't here to shame men or sell fantasies. It's here to remind you there is a brotherhood of men doing the quiet work. Men who no longer chase applause, but chase alignment. Men who no longer mask their wounds with noise, but find strength in silence. If that speaks to something in you, a pulse you almost forgot was there, you belong here. Because the man who lost her is not the end of your story. You are still becoming. And maybe, just maybe, you weren't meant to get her back. Maybe you are meant to become the version of yourself who would never lose a woman like that again. Because a man cannot honor the woman he lost until he honors the boy he once was. There is a kind of man who doesn't awaken until after the storm. Not during the love, not during the chaos, but in the still, sacred aftermath, where the memory of her is no longer loud, but lingering. A presence in absence, a truth echoing where denial once stood. And this man, now past 50, no longer lives through ego. He lives through essence, because by now he understands. The heart doesn't break to punish us. It breaks to make room. Room for the version of himself he denied. Room for the self-worth he once outsourced. Room for the kind of love that doesn't arrive in youth, but in maturity. When a man finally sees that presence is worth more than pride. He no longer envies the young. He pities the man who needs to prove what time has already made clear. He is no longer ruled by the hunger to possess a woman, but by the honor to understand one. And the woman he once lost, she was not punishment. She was prophecy. She came into his life to reflect back the parts of him he refused to meet. And when he failed to meet her, it wasn't because she was too much. It was because he was still fragmented. Jung called it individuation, the holy process of becoming whole, of integrating shadow and soul, fear and love, instinct and wisdom. And this man, now in his 6th decade, has finally stopped running from himself. He has stopped searching for completion in conquest. He has started becoming the man he was always meant to be. Now, when he meets someone, he doesn't perform. He listens. Now, when he loves, he doesn't possess. He offers. Now, when he's silent, it's not punishment. It's peace. He is no longer waiting for someone to see his worth. He has remembered it. And that remembering, that reconnection to soul, is what makes him magnetic in a way that youth never could. So if you're watching this, and you're over 50, maybe divorced, maybe still married but emotionally hollow, maybe sitting in silence because no one taught you how to speak in truth, let me say this: you are not too late. You are not too broken. You are not too far gone. Because the love you lost wasn't just hers, it was yours too. The kind of love that lives in presence, in patience, in the man who no longer runs from depth. And now, finally, you have the tools to honor it. Let this be your season of quiet power, of sacred boundaries, of unapologetic wholeness. You don't need to chase youth. You need to protect your peace. You don't need to be chosen. You need to choose, with clarity, with integrity, with calm. Because the woman you once lost may never return. But the man she saw in you, he still can. And if you've heard your soul whisper during this video, even once, then this is where your journey begins. Subscribe to this channel, not to follow a trend, but to remember who you were before the world told you what to be. Join the circle of men who feel deeply, reflect quietly, and grow without noise. And if this message stirred something inside you, something tender, something true, share it with someone else who needs to be reminded. The man who regrets losing her is also the man who now has the power to choose himself. The man who knows his worth doesn't chase, he invites. He doesn't beg to be seen, he becomes the mirror. He doesn't mourn youth, he masters presence. The second half of your life can be the first time you're truly whole. Now breathe, close the tab slowly, and walk back into the world. Not louder, but deeper. Not faster, but freer. Not younger, but finally awake.